Well, I think Parliamentary Review does something very interesting. It provides a platform for people to share and express their views, and I hope we're going to be able to build on that even more so that people can interconnect with each other. But it also gives an opportunity for parliamentarians to know that people are taking interest in what they're doing and how they're doing it.
Hello and welcome to the Parliamentary Review podcast, the podcast that homes in on leadership. I'm Jonathan White, and in each episode I'm joined by directors, CEOs, CFOs, government ministers, chairmen, presidents, maybe one day even the head of British Airways, that is, if they don't cancel on us. The aim is to discover who these people are, the people who get up each morning and make Britain work. We learn if European stocks will rally at the hope of a new Italian coalition, and if the future of car manufacturing will only include automatic transmission, and of course the innovation and success in the country that make it all worthwhile in the end. We also get their take on the current political and economic state of the country. Later on in this episode, you'll have the chance to hear our exclusive interview with Lord Blunkett, the former Home Secretary, former Education Secretary, and of course the current co-chairman of the Parliamentary Review. But for now, we're joined by David Parnell. David is one of two senior partners at DP's Financial Advice and Services, a small professional independent advice company based in the Midlands with offices in Nuneaton and Solihull. The firm was established in 1999 and has gone from strength to strength since then, in spite of many challenges thrown at it by both the market and the government. We'll be looking at those in more detail now. David, welcome.
Hello.
Thank you very much for joining us today. Now, it's been a few months since DP's Financial Advice and Services has been in the review. I think the listeners would love to know what, if anything, the firm yourself has been up to since.
Well, we've carried on really from the busy sector that we're in since the April 2015 Pensions Freedom Act, and that's brought in lots of challenges.
I think that's definitely something we'll be talking about in a little bit more detail later on. It's certainly something that's brought more challenges, I think, than the sector was expecting, actually. But the two of you behind the company, yourself and you're a tax specialist, your partner, David Parkinson, pension specialist. The company's been established now for 20 years this year. What motivated the two of you in the first instance to start and then grow the company?
Well, we've been in the industry, both of us 30 years, of which we were tied agents for a number of times, but the next natural step was be independent and be impartial, which basically we offered our clients and new clients a comprehensive service across the board. So it's really just to self-improve ourselves, self-improve our proposition, and service that and carry on from there. And so, like I say, we specialise in the wealth management sector, and it grows in evolution like we have. So it was a natural thing to do.
Actually, and especially when it does come to something as sensitive, that people's money, and people can be nervous, think naturally sometimes about talking about it in a frank manner sometimes. It is, I think you've sort of alluded to it already, it's so important they're able to trust and get on with the people that they know that will be looking after it.
Yeah, I mean, we offer a personal service.
Absolutely.
I think what we do is we're very good at putting things in layman's terms. And our mantra is to add value, save time and money. If we can't do that, we wouldn't expect anybody to pay us. Because that is exactly, but we do follow that through. So we've deliberately kept the company local and small to medium. The reason why that is we don't want to take on or the potential headaches, really, because we trust each other. So,
absolutely key. And I'm 10 years or less than 10 years setting up the business, and now over 10 years ago, of course. the sector, the country, the world economy experienced the financial crisis. And if anything, really, how did that impact the business, and did you have to reevaluate at that point?
It was a massive impact regarding clients' valuations and expectation levels. But once people got the story, and if they're medium to long-term investors, then it was not a major issue. I wouldn't want to go through that again, but it's just the case of people wanted the reassurances where the money was in the right place. So it depended on the individual. So if you manage people's expectations levels at the start and give the service, then there shouldn't be any nasty surprises, because it's part of the territory that people invest in. It's that, so if people have made 70% but it comes down by 30% or whatever, they're still made 40% gain. So it keeps people's options realistic. I wouldn't say there wasn't any problems at that stage, because it uncovered things that we weren't even aware of, is how things were managed with certain fund managers and administrators. Yes. And on the back of that, we had to police all that and sort that out. So
I can't help but feel that we certainly found out about things that we didn't know were going on. I think some of the people doing the things didn't think they were going on either. So
exactly.
A heck of a learning curve. And you've already mentioned it, in fact, but of course in 2015 we had to contend with the new Pension Scheme Act. Now that's something that must have really driven quite a lot of traffic to the business.
Oh, absolutely. We're in an ideal position to place the company to deal with these types of inquiries, because the qualification, the experience and the knowledge that we got. And I think most decent IFAs in that sector, they've all had a boom of inquiries because basically, from a layman's terms, you can do whatever you want to do with your pension. And a lot of the time we do is to protect people against themselves from raping and pillaging what they've got, because they think they can just take it and blow it and don't think about taxation consequences of running out of money. So a lot of our job is to educate our client base so they have a clear understanding and direction of a way going forward. So what we have to emphasise, our business is giving advice, not facilitating people's orders. And that's a big thing that comes across, which people get to understand. Yeah.
And is that something you maybe given what you've done for the last couple of decades, you weren't surprised, David, but might someone be surprised at perhaps the level of education in what people know about their own pensions and what they should be doing with it?
Yeah, that's not a surprise at all, because there's lots of information out there. There's lots of things that are, in fact, people get information overkill. What they haven't got is the knowledge. And my job is to simplify the information to get people to have informed choices of what they want to do. And also, ultimately, I'll come up with a recommendation. Now, because of the processing and because of the things that we've learned since 2008, it's a lot of paperwork and a lot of, we have to assess what liability we're taking on. So, which is fair enough.
Of course.
Yeah.
Now, looking more broadly at the sector, perhaps, David, and perhaps in the medium term, what would you identify at the moment as being the main challenges facing the market at the moment?
Well, in the pension world, we've just had doctors apparently going to get some sort of rules changing for their annual allowance or pension contributions because of the taxation. So if that's going to happen, I haven't been in detail, then I would imagine all other people earning that sort of money are going to get the same sort of deal as well, because I don't understand why it'd be payable for one sector and not the other.
Right.
So that's the sort of headline thing which could be a benefit to a lot of people for taxation reasons and therefore more investment to pensions. There is also, because of defined benefits of final salary schemes that used to be, there seems to be a lot of activity in our sector about transferring, and the Financial Conduct Authority have reviewed some of this advice. I think that sectors, rightly so, should be tighter. There's a number of different things from contingency charging being banned, etc., which may or may not be useful. But that's really has to be done on an individual basis. But
I think I'm right in saying, because the proposed measures that the FCA have planned are quite substantial, if I'm right.
Yeah, but the problem is that the FCA and the regulator want higher standards, and if the people want the best advice, they've got to pay for it because the liability is taken. So potentially capping people's fees on these sort of things is silly, really, but there you go. That's my opinion.
Well, I think they are still in what they are determining the consulting phase until at the end of October. So whether I've never quite really known how much they really do consult during their consulting phase, but it's certainly something that I think that more people need to be talking about right now before that finishes. And I should also actually bring up, because no doubt how big of a headache it was for you, I don't know, and whether it was worth it, I'd like to find out. Obviously, last couple of years you've had to deal with getting GDPR ready. How did you find that process? Was there enough communication from government, and was it worth it?
Well, time will tell if it's worth it. It was the right ball ache, it was the right headache, and it needed to be done. So if it's got to be done, we just get on and do it. To be honest, it doesn't really matter what I think. If that's what's got to be done, it's got to be done. If it's a benefit, I hope so. And time will tell.
Yes, I think certainly the jury's still out on that one. A bit of a harsh question, perhaps, or mean, but it is a bit of fun. If you were to put you on the spot, David, if you were, say, a chance of the afternoon, you had a magic wand, what is it you would do in one sweeping reform, if you could click your fingers, to improve your business and indeed the economy as a whole?
Well, regarding if you're looking at the pension sector, I'd get rid of the lifetime allowance, I'd get rid of the annual allowance, and I'd get rid of the income cap if people are in drawdown, just to simplify the process. On the back of that, I think you'll get more pension contributions, and therefore eventually there's going to be more money in the economy, etc. It'll be a more attractive place to invest. I think I hate to say the B word, but I think in the short term we've got to get rid of the Brexit. I'm not sure heard about that. It's something that needs to be sorted. I mean, doesn't matter which way you vote. It needs to be sorted out.
Well, I think I'm glad you said it before I did, but I think you hit the nail on the head, actually, because it has been over 3 years since that vote, and the fact that we're still discussing about how it's going to end is poisonous for the economy and for businesses and how they plan, as you well know. And I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth here, David, but I assume that is something that at this point now, however it ends, it needs to end, and people need to get back to be able to planning.
Yeah, I mean, it's affecting our business slightly at the moment because people are conscious of when it's a good time to invest or place money into the market, which, to be honest, if Brexit happens, a deal or no deal, it'll probably be priced in the market anyway, and we're more likely to have announced an election before then.
Yes.
That's where we seem to be heading. I think... it's a very difficult one because if we all believe in democracy, we should be out. But then the people who voted probably didn't vote for a no deal. So, but ultimately, we should be respecting democracy. That's my own personal opinion.
Yes, and I think that and if it's not, I am very worried. I think a lot of people are about what those democratic consequences will be. The apathy that will create, or maybe worse, angriness within a society is not something that's easy to get rid of.
I think it's all reflected, and that's why we've got people who are voting for the extremes or looking for the solutions to the extremes, and not just in political life. It could be in all sorts of lifestyles, from religious upwards. So I think that's already been reflected, unfortunately. So we need some middle ground, really. We need a common sense party, really.
I wonder for how many centuries that has been said. But you're right again, because I think there is. I remember in 2016, the sort of middle of the ground Leave argument was, we'd be happily just to be out of the customs union, we'd settle with that. And then the middle of the ground Remaining argument was essentially the European Union isn't perfect, but let's try and make it better. Whereas now we seem to have the Leave element suggesting that it needs to be sort of cut the ropes completely, and the Remain elements have seemed to have fallen in love with the European Commission. So it's a tricky one.
I think if the backstop was negotiated properly, I don't think we even have these issues, because we would have got the vote and gone through there. So I think a lot of people are using it for political gain. I'll say, including Europe and European countries, because I'm not being cynical, but I can't see many incentive for them to encourage getting out easy.
Of course. They need to make an example of the second largest economy leaving, otherwise...
Exactly.
That's spot on. It's something that hopefully is now near to an end, but there are so many variables along the way.
Well, I'll use your quote. It's near to the end.
It will be over by Christmas, right? Now, David, you've been in the business for a couple of decades now. What have been your guiding principles over the years, would you say, that have made a success for you?
Well, it's subjective what success is, but first of all, it's hard work. I think you've got, certainly in our industry, you've got to have the integrity and trustworthiness. That's got to be part of your core values, and the ethos of the company and the people we work with have got to have those as well. I think if you've got them ingredients, you can make a cake that's going to be successful anyway. Determination. I think, I think anything. Sometimes you have 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. As long as you go in the right direction. And that's it, really.
And something I do hear quite a bit from those in your industries that, and you've already mentioned the fact that there are obviously adults that don't know really perhaps some of the things they should know about their own personal finances. There needs to perhaps be something more at the school level in educating children about the practicalities of money and its management.
Yeah, well, I think that's been touted a few times. I don't know where they'll get that in the curriculum, to be honest, because just to learn about savings, investment, budgeting, how to get a mortgage, pensions, retirement planning, life financial planning would be a good tool. But like I say, it seems to be a good in theory, but if it will work is another thing, because a bit like communism, that was good in theory, that didn't work either. So,
well, with any luck, well, who's to say that we may end up with a communist government before we end up with
well, we might
financial education schools, but that's not for us to say, is it? I think it's been great for you joining us today.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Cheers.
Goodbye. I hope you all enjoyed our chat with David, and especially learning more about the challenges facing the sector and how the whole team at DP's Financial Advice and Services are continuing to raise standards. If you haven't heard it before, coming up now is our conversation with the Parliamentary Review's co-chairman, David Blunkett. Lord Blunkett served as Home and Education Secretary in Tony Blair's cabinet before receiving a peerage in 2015. Outside of politics, he's the Vice President of the Royal National Institute of Blind People, the National Alzheimer's Society, and when he has the time, he can be found cheering on his team, Sheffield Wednesday. I hope you enjoy listening as much as I enjoyed speaking to David. Here it is now. We're now joined by Lord Blunkett. Thank you very much for joining us.
You're very welcome.
Now, it would probably be remiss of me if I didn't start, given the recent events in Parliament. I didn't ask you, given your 32 years in that place, about your thoughts regarding the unprecedented situation I think the public are looking at the minute.
Well, I think I see it very much like Joe Public. I see it as though I'm looking at something that is made up, that is scripted, that is like almost a sci-fi film where anything can happen and then anything does happen. And I'm very sad about that, because I think that it's damaged our parliamentary democracy. I think that it's brought politics into disrepute, and I think it's created anger on all sides, whether people were strongly in favour of remaining or whether they were, as we call them, Brexiteers.
Absolutely. And given that situation, whether it's going to be a general election, many people are beginning to worry about how apathy taking effect.
Well, I'm worried about two things. Apathy in the respect of turnout and whether people vote, and anger and, if you like, the friction developed into a failure to be able to have a democratic dialogue, so that the respect that we have for each other, that the way in which we debate issues is often now broken down, and there's abuse in the street, not just of people because they're considered to be different or foreign, but because people recognise they have a different point of view. Now, that is new. I've been around in formal politics now for, goodness, almost all my adult life, because I was elected to a local authority in my city of Sheffield when I was 22. And I've never seen that. I've seen people get very annoyed, and that's fine, and people should get angry, but I've never experienced them display it in such personal venom before. And we need to calm that, because our democracy depends on people being able to have genuine disagreements and differences and to work them through the political process. Otherwise, we fall, as history teaches us, into the hands of extremists.
Absolutely. And given that you've just said what you just said, a lot of people are talking now about whether the party structure, which does exist at the minute, it can survive. We've seen both the Labour Party and the Conservative Party showing signs of buckling.
I think the political system the party system will survive. It may have a very rocky time in the near future, but I think it'll right itself. But it will only do that if political parties themselves sort out what's going on internally. I think both major parties have been, to use an old phrase, infiltrated. Came across a prominent minister just outside the cabinet whose current chair of their Conservative Association was the UKIP candidate against him back in 2015. We know about the challenges within the Labour Party and the way in which people who were thrown out of the party are have either been able to or are seeking to rejoin. And so we've got this two-ender, if you like, the bread in the two sides of the sandwich coming together, and the middle is being squeezed. Now, there's academic work to say that actually the electorate aren't all that keen on centre parties, particularly at the moment. And I think we need to be wary of believing that the creation of some sort of centrist party in Britain would solve the problem. It would temporarily, but it wouldn't resolve the differences that people have and how we work them through.
A lot of people have been suggesting recently that the only way out of this situation is with a second referendum. And I write in saying that you have quite reluctantly come to that position yourself.
It took me a very long time to come to the conclusion that we would need an affirmative vote. I resisted it because I come from and represented an area deeply disaffected, feeling the effects of deindustrialization and then the austerity measures on the back of the global meltdown, and felt in my bones, which is why I wasn't one of those who thought we were easily going to win the referendum for Remain in 2016, that you need to deal with the underlying problems and causes of that disaffection. And the simple slogan, "They didn't hear you the first time, tell them again," could be very effective, a kind of Trumpian slogan that could be adopted by those who are very, very vehement Brexiteers. However, I think given the state that we're in, I came to the conclusion a few weeks ago, and I wrote in the Daily Telegraph, that I think the only way to deal with this is to get an agreement for this interim period, because that's what it is, a transition from where we are to where we might be, and then put that to the British people. And if the British people don't like that negotiated agreement, either Theresa May's original or something that emerges from the discussions and the debate and the toing and froing between the two major parties, put that to the electorate and give them a chance 3 years on from 2016 to make a new choice as to whether that's what they want to go for, that's the direction they want to take, or whether they'd like to take a step back and remain in the European Union.
And do you think that the people of Sheffield that did vote leave, many of whom voting for the first time in decades or the first time ever, do you think that they would feel maybe slightly frustrated at the call for a second vote?
Yes, I think they would. And I think we just have to be really honest about that. There would be a great deal of frustration, bordering on anger, people saying, we gave you the message, why didn't you just do it? And we have to be straight with them. The reason it's been complex, the reason it's taken this time, the reason that we're in the undoubted mess we're in, is because it wasn't simple. You didn't, as some people thought, sign a bit of paper and walk away. This is a complex, interconnected, economically, socially, in terms of our trade and our relationships, not just within the European Union, but with the European Union's agreements across the world. This is a complex issue. And to pretend otherwise is not to give people what they want. It's to patronize them and say, yes, we don't think you were wrong. We don't think that you got it wrong when you thought it was a simple way out. I think you just have to be straight with them, and they'll be angry. I mean, people are angry with me when I walk around in my own constituency and say, what are you up to? And I say, I'm up to trying to speak the truth. I'm up to trying to say it as it is, as I always have done.
Absolutely. Now, given all of that, one would expect the governing party to perhaps be somewhere between 20 points and to 30 points behind the opinion polls, but they are not. And there has been an awful lot of criticism of the leadership of the opposition regarding that. Would you have any advice for the leadership of your party?
Well, I think belatedly, from the beginning of April, the two parties realised that they were going to sink separately if they didn't actually try and make an effort and at least display some endeavour to work together. I think had there been two different leaders post-2016 referendum, this would have happened a great deal earlier. It hasn't, but it can now. And it is remarkable that in the circumstances that the government have found themselves, not just in not being able to get the kind of deal that some people wanted, not even being able to hold all their party together, but actually being totally riven publicly with cabinet responsibility having broken down, to find themselves only marginally behind, or even on opinion polls through March, marginally in front of the Labour Party, is astonishing. And once this period is over, I think Labour will need to take a very long, hard look at why the British people have not turned, as they often do, to what is called Her Majesty's opposition. There are very complex reasons for that, including the fact that the leadership of the party have only realised, I think, very, very recently, that you have to reach out to people whose views you don't agree with, and you have to win them over to something more than the issues and the policies and the ideology you thought of in the first place.
And on that point, you'll be aware, certainly, that the Parliamentary Review itself has been dedicated to showcasing leadership in all its forms across the country. Now, speaking to many of our contributors, they have made clear that they do feel that leadership has been lacking, both from the government and opposition, as you've said. In your many years in politics, is there a time in certainly recent history where there has been perhaps a leadership vacuum like we're seeing today?
I think we find in Britain an interesting paradox. People want strong leaders, but they want leaders that listen and are responsive. And the two don't always go together. I've lived through the period of both Margaret Thatcher and Tony Blair, two leaders who knew what they wanted to do and were prepared to put it on the line. I've lived through Ted Heath and John Major, who were less clear. Ted Heath on Europe, yes, but not on much else. John Major really trying to mop up after the controversial and divisive Thatcher era, where they showed a different style of leadership. Now, they were portrayed as being weak. I don't think that's always the case. I think that you can have leaders who are very clear what they want to do, but to turn on its head the Marxist slogan, speak softly and walk with a big stick, they can actually do the job clearly and decisively. Clem Attlee was such a person, and in many ways so is Harold Macmillan. And those are the kind of leaders where you don't get bombast, you don't get, I know best and I'm going to push this through, but you actually get someone who can genuinely create a coalition of the willing, but has a clear idea about their values. And I hope we'll return to that.
Absolutely. And I think one of the strengths of the review has always been its sense of bipartisanship.
Well, I think Parliamentary Review does something very interesting. It provides a platform for people to share and express their views, and I hope we're going to be able to build on that even more so that people can interconnect with each other. But it also gives an opportunity for parliamentarians to know that people take an interest in what they're doing and how they're doing it, and therefore to get the message that they've got to reflect outwards. We need both. We need the input into the system. We need voices. We need ideas. We need experiences through Parliamentary Review inwards, but we also need to ensure that the way in which our politics works is reflected outwards, so that people firstly understand how the system works, secondly, the complexity and difficulty of it, and thirdly, the way in which they need to tell us, I mean, I'm in the upper house now, but to tell us as parliamentarians what they think and where we're going wrong, and for us to listen.
Absolutely. And on that point, you've been in public service most of your life, Parnell Blunkett, ever since Sheffield City Council. I mean, in that time, what are the key lessons you think you've learned in the best way for policymakers and those at the coalface to communicate and work together?
I've learned that actually there is enormous wisdom out there, and if you're prepared to engage and to listen, then your views might actually change. Mine have on a number of issues, particularly social issues, what small L liberal issues over the years, going in the opposite direction, it has to be said, to most people as they age. And you need to ensure that you've reached out to sufficient people to create that coalition that allows you to make progress, and that you won't create everything you want and change everything you want for the better overnight. It will never happen. There's no day where everything's done and we can all wash our hands of it. That's fine. We build building blocks. We stand, if you like, historically on the shoulders of those who came before us. And if we get that message, we won't be too frustrated when everything doesn't happen immediately, but we'll be determined to make progress, and we'll punish politically, democratically, those who don't.
Absolutely. And perhaps finally, with that concluding point, it's fair to say, as you've already mentioned, a lot of the population are frustrated, no matter how they vote in the referendum or their general political opinions. But perhaps, for those people, is there something you'd point to be optimistic, looking towards the future about?
I think I'm very clear. We're a great nation. We can't just do things on our own. We have to recognise that we live in an incredibly rapidly growing global environment, and the power sources and the power politically has changed over the last 20, 30 years. But we are creative, we are innovative, and we will pull through, and we'll do it because we won't have anyone else to blame anymore if we come out of the European Union, and we'll need to literally pull our socks up and do it ourselves. In the end, my message is clear. Nothing is ever as good as it seems at the time, and nothing is ever as bad. And we've come through difficult times in the past, and we'll come through again.
Lord Blunkett, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonathan.
As always, it's been a pleasure interviewing and learning from our guests. I hope you've all enjoyed listening. Until next time, I'm off to the Greencoat Boy to raise a glass to raising standards. Goodbye.
Thank you very much for listening to our podcast. You can find every episode on iTunes, YouTube, and Spotify. The views expressed by guests in each podcast are their own. They do not represent the opinions of the Parliamentary Review, Westminster Publications, Lord Pickles, Lord Blunkett, David Curry, or any other guests on the podcast. If you'd like to know more about the Parliamentary Review, please visit our website at www.theparliamentaryreview.co.uk.